Hello folks, today I've got an extremely big model from the guys at Para Bellum Wargames. It's for the Woodrun army and it's the not even released Apex Predator. Okay, so exciting. So new it doesn't even have a real box cover yet. This is the Apex Predator. So in the box you get its base. That is a mighty 11 centimeters square, 110 mil. The assembly instructions. With optional saddle for Predator. Seems very easy. It's a T-Rex. Put a T-Rex together, away you go. Then we get 5 sprues. So let's take a look at these in a bit more detail, shall we? Okay, our first sprue then contains some of our heads. I know there are options here, so we have screaming or mouth closed, I think. A massive tongue. How big is that tongue? It's probably over an inch long, which for a model is particularly large. Some nice big pieces of plastic. Good texture on the feathers and on the skin. Sort of veins appropriately rippling. Yep, nice look. Sprue gates are fairly hefty for the size of the model. They would have to be, but certainly thinner than they were on some of the older models, which was a bit of an issue. Next up we have the tail. That is that's a heck of a size of a tail. Again, nice individual feathering detail, straps and the like on the I suppose armor or carriage. The Apex Predator can be fielded in a multitude of ways, so you can either run it as just the beast, or you can have it as a mount for either a Predator or a matriarch queen, who's going to be available separately as a resin add-on. Speaking of the Predator, here we have his components. So a lot going on this sprue. We've got the 2 big marks of Conquest that go as part of the accoutrement on our Apex Predator. Here we have the saddle section, including this piece here. A lot of wicker work woven in there. Very tribal. We have the Predator himself. So that's your standard Woodrun Saurian warrior. So he's a big fella in and of himself. Here we have his body and neck. I'd just like to give a shout out to this spear, or more properly a lance. That has got to be almost 20 centimeters long. And finally we have somebody on top of a monster carrying a weapon that could actually hurt people on the ground, not carrying a standard spear like others. That is huge. There's a massive rock for massive foot on massive rock, presumably. Then our last 2 are the left and right halves of the body. Let's just have a quick look. So, bigly big. It's like looking at two halves of an Easter egg. It's enormous. Absolutely enormous. So this sprue has got the horned neck dress of the predator, his hand, along with one of the apex predator's arms. I know some people have been complaining that it's not a Tyrannosaurus, it's something else. Having talked to the guys from Para Bellum, they say it's fictional. I'm inclined to agree with them. So I'm going to keep calling it a Tyrannosaurus as and when I can be bothered. Here's the seating area. So I say seating area, the apex or the predator stands on top of the apex predator, so he doesn't actually sit on it. So his feet fit into these two sort of flattened pieces. Because why sit down? You know, you've got to give yourself some height. Nice detail. Big legs. Massive legs. So they come in two halves per side. We have a couple of head options for the predator, with or without helmet. There's one of his legs, and there is a bone piece of either armor or decorative wear. We even have some reins. The idea of attempting to rein this in seems a bit insane, so it's possible that they are straps to stop the fella from falling off, more than controlling the beast. Humongous. The last thing you get is your cards for your games of First Blood or Last Argument of Kings, so either running it as the apex predator or with the predator as a mount. First time a character has been allowed to be mounted on a monster, so maybe a sign of things to come. And an interesting colour scheme. Maybe I'll copy that. Time will tell. Let's get this big fella put together. Alright, we are back and it is built. Relatively straightforward assembly. Ran into one problem, which I'll get to in a little while. But otherwise, most of it could be done without the instructions, to be perfectly honest. Two halves to a body, two halves to a leg. There's only one way they'll go together, and you can just tear on. As you can see, I've got the predator here. For those wondering, the predator is 46mm to eye level, and to the top of the delightful bone, that would be 55mm all the way up to the top of the headrest. Missing a hand. Reason missing that hand is there is that massive 20cm long spear, which I'll either magnetize for transportation, or I'll pin and glue it once it's done and dusted. But it saves me having to try and paint that miniature with this spear constantly getting in my way like a weather vane. There's plenty of flat area there, so magnets should be fairly easy. As you can see, a lot of detail on the spear as well, between strapping and other sort of wiring. So, nice bit of kit. I do have a couple of straps still to go on. Again, these I think will have to go on once it's done. These tether him to the back of the saddle, so not just bouncing but actually tethered on, which is interesting. So kind of like that. A couple of things, when we were looking at the sprue, I thought there was a choice of heads. There are not. There is a head for our bald apex predator. The other thing was this. It's actually a knee brace, I suppose, or top of a greave, which is made from a skull. But lots of interesting detail across the actual hero. So, not the only thing that is going to go under this little close cam before we get any further away. There is a choice of two heads. So, the first head is, I think, more fitting for the mounted character version. There's a lot more straps, there's type of reins, you've got this cloth backing and all the leather straps on it. When you're building, the bottom part of the jaw, it needs to sit between these two pieces. I think you're better gluing it to one side of the jaw first and then lining that second part of the jaw up with it. So you've got a lot of joins, but the joins are not straight and are overlaid with feathers, so you may be able to get around having to fill these. You can see there's one there, but again, it's not a straight line, it's hidden by the scales. So I think a primer will actually mask that without having to spend too much time with putty. And that is not going to be seen because the head's there. So that's our first head. And then we've got our second head, which is a bit more for the predator side. So, again, more of the monster. Assembly's similar. So 2 halves to the upper, 3 halves to the lower jaw. Sorry, 3 halves. 3 pieces to the lower jaw. We have the tongue as well. Tongue has that ridging that you might see on things like geese and chicken, if you're close enough. So it's a toothed tongue, which is a nice bit of detail on it. Also, he looks very happy. Yay! And again, you should be able to hopefully mask most of this by the priming. There's a few pieces here. I would prime it first and then see whether or not I'd need to go back in with putty. Rather than putty it, I could save myself a lot of time if you won't notice it once it's primed. So my only decision now is which of my 2 finger puppets will actually be on the body itself. Speaking of the body, once the head is on this, let's pick this head for novelty value. It rocks, I want to say 4, 6... Oh, it's somewhere in the region of about 32 centimeters long from snout to tail. But again, like I say, simple build. So even though things like the body's in 2 halves and then both legs are in 2 halves and then the feet are in 2 pieces, you may want to clean up some of them. So I cleaned up the foot pads before I glued the claw tops to them, because you're going to have a seam line that runs midway through the foot pad, and then this overlaps it, so it might be a bit difficult to get to. We have the icons of Conquest on the back, and all of this wicker work. We've got the feathers running along the breadth of the tail. When it came to this piece, rather than fight with it, when the 2 halves go together, this is slightly further away. I say slightly further away. If I put the 2 bottom halves together with the glue on it, then there's a gap up here. So rather than try to tape or pin or tie it down, I glued this together first. Once that was completely glued, I then ran a bit more glue around the middle seam and held that together, and then just ran down the rest. So this was already completely solid before I glued these pieces, and it meant I didn't have to worry about taping it together. The saddle is 2 halves with these 2 foot plates on it. This is where my issue comes in. If I just grab the instructions. Okay, so you can see here the saddle, there's 2 little bits at the bottom, which are these 2 little fellows, and they're supposed to go somewhere, I think in here, locking down to this. I cannot for the life of me work out the orientation. It's the only problem with the entire kit. I don't know if it's which one goes to which side. I can probably work that out from the silhouette. They do have the sort of the bas relief of the feathers on them, so they must sit flush, but I can't get them to sit flush. I mean, I might be trying to put them in too high. They may have to go further down. But At the moment, I'm planning on having the saddle as removable, so it can be run as a predator or as the apex predator by itself, or I can use it as the mount. So the saddle actually isn't glued on. If I put those two little pieces on, it may be difficult to remove it again. Again, that has the feathered texture, so you hear the click, and it's not coming off. So I'm going to leave that, not bother with those two pieces. The predator will go on, and then obviously he gets tied by those two straps in the back to these two horns to give him a bit of stability. But there we have it. The apex predator barely fits on the base. It's that sort of size of a creature, and an absolute giant. Well, I suppose people may want to know how tall it is as well. The answer is, let me see, around 114 mil from tippy toes to tops of shoulders. And like I say, it's not far away from 30 centimeters to 300 mil long. Actually, I can probably work that out correctly if I do this. Yeah, I would say just over 300 millimeters long. I have a slightly bigger measuring tool down here. If you do put this head on, he goes up by a bit because the other head is further forward. But yeah, the apex predator, stunning bit of kit. Can't wait to get some paint on it. Should be a lot of fun, and definitely something that people who are playing the Woodrune are almost certainly going to have, and people who are playing against the Woodrune are certainly going to fear. Okay, there we have it. Built, done, dusted, a monstrous monster from the guys at Para Bellum. Definitely starting to smooth out a lot of the edges as things go along. That's probably the best kit I've put together from them to date. Really nice miniature. Two good options in the box, and like I say, there's a resin apex matriarch queen that's going to be coming out as a separate add-on. So if you want to have a warband leader in a slightly different style, you can get her as well if you're after that for the Woodrune. I plan on having a lot of fun painting mine. I know Leandros from Para Bellum is having a lot of fun painting 3 for his army because I think he likes fluffy lists. But let me know what you think of the apex predator below, folks. I'll be back with some more Woodrune soon, and in the new year, another Path of Conquest.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.